October Red Boxing here with Mr. Sims Jr. We seem to have a bit of a senior and junior thing going on here. Talk to us a little bit about how it was getting this fight made.
Yeah, this is family business all round.
Yeah.
Actually, really, the initial negotiations went really smooth, and all of the major contractual terms were agreed quite quickly. Like the weight, for example, they came to us with a weight, we agreed the weight. There was a little bump in the road with the rehydration because we felt like they weren't taking the weight that seriously, and we felt it went a little bit too smoothly. So we did renegotiate on the rehydration, but it was mainly just the terms of like ego. Like, we want to be Eubank Ben. We want to have the big changing room. We want to walk out second. And I think after talking to Conor, and Conor's quite smart and he's a businessman himself, and Conor was like, you know what? Put the egos aside, give him everything he wants, and let's just get in there and do what we got to do. Because once the bell rings and it's just me and him, the big changing room, the name on the poster, it don't matter. So let's just get in and do it.
I like the fact that you've said that because I wasn't aware of obviously the rigmarole behind the scenes, like you said, walking out, corner, changing room, all of that. And I think sometimes we tend to miss the intricacies all of it. But you mentioned something clear there, egos. What is it with it? Because it kind of just seems to me that he just wants to get in there and fight. You mentioned that the weight was agreed. However, when Eubank Jr. was up there talking at the presser, you brought the weight in as maybe a possible issue.
Well, I think going back to our negotiations, when we thought the weight might have not been taken seriously, it seems like it is now. And it seems to be his main focus. And I think when he's talking about not preparing 100%, I think the weight is on his mind. And I think he's thinking, I just need to make the weight. Conor Benn's thinking, I'm going in for the best training camp of my life. I'm going to get the best sparring. I've got the best team around me. Everything that I've been and done before, I'm going to take that into this, and I'm going to prepare for Chris Eubank. Like, this is the biggest fight of my life. And he's still got to lose weight. You know, he's still walking around over 160. I think he's a stone over 160 in the moment. So he's still got to get that weight off. And what was most interesting, I thought, that we all got to witness live, the size difference wasn't that much. There wasn't that much in it. A few inches maybe. I think Conor looks stockier. I think he's got like the bigger legs, which you can tell that's where he's getting his power from. And Chris was a bit bigger up top on the frame, but I don't know, it looked a bit closer than what we originally thought.
And that's what I'm talking about as well, because we see them in the flesh together. You know, we've seen various snippets of interview conversations that they've had, but to see them together like that, and he called it a fantasy fight, because it is. A lot of us fans, like I said, witnessed the parents fight. So to see them together like that, the difference isn't really that much. Do you think the public have literally said, oh, this is a mismatch, the weights are too, you know, it's too difficult, etc.? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I do think that Conor's got a big job to do going up a couple of weights. Like, I do think that's going to be the one. Look, Chris is campaigning at 160. He's got to drop 3 pounds. I don't think that's going to be an easy task, but he is up and around that weight. We haven't seen Conor Benn go above 147. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he carries the power up. But Tony, knowing how he's been sparring, like he said earlier on the table, they don't get welterweights in. They're getting middles, super middles, and light heavyweights in because the welterweights can't stand the power that Conor Benn's thrown during these training camps. So they have to get people who can take the power. And we're talking about 18-ounce gloves and head guards. They're not going to be wearing that on the night. It's going to be 10 ounces, and it's going to be all on the line. So I think if Chris thinks this is going to be an easy fight, and he's just going to walk in first round and think that he's going to get into a war with Conor and he's going to fold him because of his size, I think he's going to feel the power early. And I think that's what's going to make this fight really interesting.
And we talk about generational things here, and it's something that I will speak to Chris about. Conor has kept the same trainer. This almost seems like a family in-house, generational, from trainer to son to manager. Do you think that, I don't know, it's a sort of like a hindrance for Chris going into it, because Conor has that continuity of that solid, stable, in-house team around him, where Eubank doesn't really have that because Roy Jones Jr., as you know, is out of the country?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like Chris's career anyway, it's always been a bit of an unusual dynamic because his dad was around in the early days, and then Ronnie was kind of playing his part. Then he decided to make a change, and then he's with another guy at some point. I can't remember his name, but there was another guy at some point, and then Roy's come in for the last two or three, maybe. Roy Jones to me was a good, Obviously, he was amazing. He was my favourite fighter growing up. So, firstly, I don't think you can get a more experienced trainer than Roy because he's been there and done it all. But I think he was good for Chris because Chris was an all-out war fighter, and I think he kind of taught Chris how to box a bit. And although that wasn't the usual style we was used to seeing, he was being a bit smarter in terms of what he was doing and how he was composing himself in the ring. So I like the Roy Jones link up. Whether he's going to bring him in for this fight, I don't know. Like, it seems to be a bit uncertain, and it seems to be a bit uncertain whether his dad's going to play any part as well. What we do know is that Nigel is going to be in camp, and he's going to play a big part in the team, and that's not the usual circumstances. The usual circumstances is that takes a step back, lets Tony and Conor do their thing. He's been around a few camps, and he communicates with Tony, and I think that might be the same sort of dynamic they're going to take again. Nigel's going to come in camp. He's going to work with Tony. Tony's going to head up the coaching, the corner. And I think he's going to use and extract all that experience and the emotion that Nigel's going to bring to the camp and bring it into the fight. So we know that it's uncertain what Chris is going to do.
In comparison, then we talk about styles make fights. Obviously, Ben Senior, like you said, he's coming in. He's going to be a part of that. But their styles, I'd say Ben's probably more similar to his father than Chris is to his father. Chris Jr. is to his father. We talk about those styles making fights. How do you see this as a matchup in relation to their styles? Because Chris can be quite aggressive, but we know Conor is somebody that likes to go in, like the shark. As soon as he sees that blood, he's going for it, and he's got that knockout power. Talk to me about that.
I think Chris started to adapt more of his dad's style when he was with Roy. And I think his dad was always a nice boxer, could punch a bit. And I think he started to adapt that style a bit more than what we used to see from him. He was used to come in and use his work ethic and combinations and fast hands and just try to overpower his opponent. But now with Conor, I think Conor's always had the power. And it was more about just, and this was a big job that Tony did with Conor, it was just a bit more, how do we teach him how to box? How do we teach him how to defend? And that was what Nigel maybe lacked in his career. And I think he was an amazing puncher, and he was just used to going in and blowing people out. And that's what he couldn't do with Chris Eubank Sr. And I think that's what made that fight so interesting. But Conor can box now. We've seen it. He's boxed Van Hill last time out, former world champion in Algeria. Everybody was applauding his slipping and sliding, he's defending. And I think if he brings that in with the mixture of the power that he carries into this fight, we're going to see a really good fight.
And the fans, what I will say, before we close off, is the fans always seem to be quite fussy and picky with Conor. I've spoke to him before, I've had him as a guest on the channel, and the comments are usually quite negative to him, that he doesn't really fight anyone, that he picks and chooses who he fights. He doesn't take on challenges that the public want to see. Avanesian is always a name that crops up for Conor Benn. Conor has described this as a fantasy fight. There's going to be many people saying more or less the same thing. But what does this fight actually mean to Conor and his team?
Well, we were looking, if you're looking back at Conor's last few opponents, we were kind of going through the stages of stepping him up, which is what you're supposed to do, especially with someone with no amateur pedigree at all. It's about going through the stages and getting them to that level. I think looking at the opportunities that were on the table, we were talking about Keith Thurman, we were talking about Danny Garcia, we were talking about final eliminator for a world title. Like, we were there. It was just that for this date, which was the date that we had penciled in, there wasn't really many people about. Avanesian always gets pulled up. The truth is, and this is how the team truly feel about Avanesian, we think Conor Benn will blow Avanesian out. When you look at like the Avanesian Kelly fight,
Dad, he's not going to jump in. I was trying to get
he might do. Dad, jump in quickly. We'll come to you afterwards, all right?
It's just would be nice to get get in past your son like you really do. So just to finish on that point, we think that Conor Benn would blow Avanesian out of there.
But there was bigger challenges and big fights on the horizon. Chris Eubank was the fight that we chose, and it's been a massive event. This is going to be one of the biggest British boxing events of all time.
Dad, your thoughts? Sorry, Mr. Sims Senior, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, same as what Charlie's saying. This is the biggest fight of the decade, if not the generation. Since the first fight of Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank Senior, and this will capture the boxing publics. It's just an unbelievable fight, and I think it's just a shame that it ain't being held in a stadium. But obviously, because if it's October the 8th, you couldn't trust the weather in England. And but what an occasion! And obviously, plenty of people are going to be able to tune in on the DAZN channel to watch it. So it's going to be a great night.
From the trainer's point of view, Conor was quite confident to say, look, I've been in camp, I've started my camp, I'm ready for this. You're sat there and you're listening to his opponent say, after the press conference, I'm going to start to get ready then. Give us your thoughts on that as a trainer.
I think Chris keeps in shape, all year round. I just think he's one of them guys. If you look at him now, he already looks in shape. And, you can't always take into account what everybody says. And a lot of mind games get played. But listen, Conor's always in shape. He's always training. So, we started our camp a couple of weeks ago, and like we always do. And he's in camp now, and he'll be ready to go on October the 8th.
And final words from you then. Conor comes back in after round one. We talk about the styles make fights and their fight styles. How are they going to merge? How do you see this fight ending?
With Conor Benn being victorious,
Do you think he's going to stop him? Maybe I should have been more accurate with that.
Who knows what happens in fights? It's two guys fighting each other, and with a pair of gloves on, and they've both got world level ability. They're both great athletes. So but I believe that Conor Benn will be victorious.
What I will say finally is to you and your team, all of you, is thank you for making a fight like this happen. It's cross-promotional. We have a lot of domestic talent in this country, and it's nice to see both Matchroom and Wasserman working together to get the fight fans, myself being one of them, a fight that we really want to see, because like Chris said, nothing has happened like this in the history of boxing before.
Yeah, and this is an amazing event for us personally to be involved with. Like for me, as a manager or an agent, this fight will go down in history. And I just wanted to say that I played my small part in being part of that.
Big part in that.
Yeah, well, Tony's an amazing trainer, and he'll always be remembered for the world champions that he's trained. But this fight and the magnitude of this fight, the photos that we see today, the interviews that were being given today, he's always going to be known for this fight as well.
And final words from yourself, your thoughts on that? It's nice from your son.
Yeah, he don't always say good things about me.
That's not
I don't believe that.
It's great. And talking about sons and fathers, obviously, as a father and son, we're both involved in this fight as well, which is great, So it's all about the families.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. October Red Boxing with Sims Senior and Sims Junior. Thank you. Hi, and thank you for watching October Red Boxing. Like, subscribe, and tap the bell for notifications. You can also find us on Instagram at October Red Boxing and on Twitter, October Red UK. And remember, at October Red, we stay ready.